नमस्कार। इस वक्त की सबसे बड़ी खबर लीजिए साथियों। इसमें 2024 दिवाली बोनस से जल्द ही कर्मचारी खाते में जमा 46,800 रुपये सरकार की तरफ से बड़ा ऐलान कर दिया गया। जी हाँ साथियों, सरकार की तरफ से 4 लाख रुपए एरी के साथ साथ पेंशनधारकों की 10% के साथ कर्मचारियों की इसमें 12 माह सैलरी का पैसा, इसमें 50% पेंशन तय हो चुकी है। अभी भी जो सबसे बड़ी खबर आई है, सरकार की तरफ से 48 लाख कर्मचारियों का दिवाली बोनस तैयार हो चुका है। इसमें 46,800 तहत के तहत इसमें सरकार की तरफ से बताना चाहूँगा अभी भी जो बड़ी अपडेट आ चुकी है। दिवाली बोनस से सरकार की तरफ से बहाल कर दिया गया। इसके साथ इसमें 18 माह एरियर का जो आपका एरियर है, सरकार की तरफ से इसमें 4 लाख रुपए एरियर का पैसा जल्द ही सभी यहाँ पे पेंशनधारकों के खाते में यहाँ पे जमा किया जाएगा। जी हाँ साथियों, आज की ये बड़ी खबर थी। देखिए आगे इसमें वित्त मंत्रालय द्वारा, सरकार द्वारा इसमें क्या आप सभी के सामने ये जो कि आपकी जो डिमांड है, ये सरकार की तरफ से यहाँ पे मंजूरी दी गई है। देखिए बड़ी खबर, वीडियो को शेयर करना। नमस्कार।
To this, as I see, much expected press conference. I'll have the Finance Secretary help me in going through the slides. I just want to give you a picture of how long it's going to be so that you're not going to be frustrated in between. There are about 32 slides, and just so that you get a picture of how we are going about this whole thing, I've arranged them in about 6 compartments. So as we move, I will alert you to the fact that I've covered one and I'm moving to the second, so that related items are grouped under one head. And even before I start doing that, just to briefly give you a picture of what's globally happening. The slide before you shows that the global situation is very clear, and the current projected global GDP growth is of about 3.2%, and probably is going to be even revised downwards. Moreover, not just one, many organizations have come out repeatedly to say the global demand is going to be very weak. So that's one broad picture. The lines there show you very clearly what is the growth globally and where India stands in that. You can see the yellow line which stands for India is still very much high above. The United States and Germany have seen inversion of yield curves, which points to slowdown in growth of consumption in these countries also. So it's not a story just of the emerging economies, but even global advanced economies are facing this. And obviously, being in India, we normally get compared with China. So as a result of the US and China trade war and subsequent currency devaluation of China, a very volatile situation has developed in the global trade. These are nothing new for you, but I just wanted to place it as a larger context with which we are speaking. And therefore, if you see the 10 major economies of the world, the size of the, the balloons or whatever, bulbs, show the size, and from among the emerging economies, the size of the economy, and therefore where they stand globally today. So the size of the circle represents the GDP as per PPP and the current international dollar terms. So you see India again in yellow, positioned comfortably very high. The growth rate still in comparison to many of these countries high, and if anything, even compared to China and the United States, our growth rate is higher than everybody else. So let's just keep that at the back of our mind, even as we go through this. One thing I just want to draw your attention to is the important line which the Prime Minister keeps repeating because he strongly believes in it, which came out in one of the newspaper interviews that he had given earlier, saying, "We respect wealth creators." I want to very clearly put that before you, to underline that that's the spirit with which the budget was presented, and that's the spirit with which we immediately invited different sectors of the economy to come and speak to us if there's anything that they wanted to say, and they were not very quick, short consultation for the sake of it. They were in-depth consultation, some of which ran for even a couple of hours. And all our secretaries were together with me during those consultation process, which ran through a whole week. And many of you all kept following us closely on that. I was happy for that. And just so that we again put this fact in context, that this government, even from 2014, has kept reform at the top of the agenda. It's an ongoing process for us. It's not as if in this tenure, post 2019, we've forgotten the reform agenda. Not at all. Reform is a continuous process, and we are treating it as a continuing endeavor. And therefore, just so that we don't forget that even simple small things to fairly complicated levels of ease of doing business related reforms were carried out by this government in its earlier tenure, continues even now. Whether it is self-certification, whether it is looking at environment clearances, just compare the time that an environment clearance took in earlier regimes and what is happening now. We've not lost that momentum. We are keeping that high on our agenda. And about the labor reforms, taxation reforms, irrespective of any other one or two points that each one of us might have, this could have been better this way, that could have been better that way. In spite of that, we have kept that momentum, and I'm just recalling that so that we don't forget the fact and we don't treat it as, we have taken it for granted, which is good. Indian economy and the society should take for granted many things which relate to ease of doing business and ease of living too. And that's the agenda with which we are moving forward. We have not slowed down, or we have not even forgotten that. With that said, you can see in the slide that we have provided here that continuously efforts are being taken by each one of the departments. Taxation, I'd like to draw your attention before I get into specifics of other things, just so that this makes the backdrop to everything which is being talked about. Is this government going to care for us? Is this government understanding what is happening in the ground? Is this government responsive enough to the changes which are coming? We are responsive. I want to assure everybody that the momentum with which we want to carry forward reform will continue. Just to draw your attention for a few things that are happening here. Pre-filling of IT returns. Revenue Secretary has been talking about it. Now the ease with which you can file your returns will be a lot more simplified if it is all pre-filled, and all that you have to do is to change any corrections that you have to make. So that strain is off you. Similarly, there will be faceless scrutiny from Vijayadashmi Day this year, which will mean that there shall not be even that one odd, I don't want to use the word, but for want of a better word, one odd over-enthusiastic officer who might go and, sit and talk about things which may be construed as harassment. That will not happen, because the whole process is going to become faceless and it will be randomized. So it's not going to be that everybody is going to be a faceless scrutiny will happen. No, it will be randomized. Big data details are being utilized. So for somebody who's got to be as scrutinized, let's say sitting in Noida, his assessment might go to Assam. So faceless scrutiny is something which is coming in from Vijayadashmi Day. Reduction of GST returns and simplified taxation, and also the number of forms is really being worked upon, and I surely assure you sooner the GST will come up with even more simplified and less number of forms. The refund process, I must underline here, has almost become automatic. Glitches where they exist, even yesterday when I was sitting with the tax administrators, I very clearly said the refund should be going through as a process, free flow. But if there are obstructions to it, we are very clearly, even tomorrow I'll be holding a meeting with, tomorrow Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, I'm holding a meeting with the GSTN people to make sure and identify as to where the glitches are in terms of flow of refund, so that it doesn't affect people. And if we think that the system is being gamed, or if there are tweakings manually being done, I am assured that we shall take action against anyone who's gaming the system. That's as regards the refund process for the GST simplification. And then finally, repeating one other thing which I mentioned along with the faceless scrutiny is risk-based approach is being taken in dealing with the taxpayers where there is high risk, where there is suspicion based on ground factual records. Action will be furthered rather than approaching everybody with a fishing expedition, as it were. So there are simplifications being done in the taxation. Labor laws, I'll just very quickly go through because you know fixed term employment has been facilitated so that there will be flexibility in hiring. Contribution to the ESIC has also been reduced to 4% from 6.5%. Web-based jurisdiction-free inspections are happening. Inspection report to be uploaded within 48 hours. So there shall not be any delay, and this is enabled already. And offences, again a very important point from the point of view of how we are approaching ease of doing business. Compounding of offences will be the priority, no other prosecution-based actions, and self-certification, which I've already said. Environment clearances, there is a single air and water clearance for MSMEs, single consent to establish a factory for MSMEs, so it's actually moving towards greater simplification and doing of business. Then corporate affairs, I just want to very quickly draw you to say that these are ongoing endeavors. We've not forgotten. I just want to draw the attention of the House before I move on to specifics, which I've already told you, 6 different headings in which I will give you my inputs. You can see that one day to incorporate a company is what is now the norm rather than an exception. Integrated incorporation forms are available. Shifting of 16 offense sections to monetary penalty has happened. So the angle that this government is going to harass people or this government is more inclined to go through prosecution is being disproved in every case that we've taken up. In every case, meaning in every act related or rule related position, we are more in favor of compounding of an offense, and where penalty can play the role, it is penalty rather than prosecution. This is the second example where we can tell you 16 such offense sections have all been taken as monetary penalty based rather than prosecution based. Faster and easier approvals are being given for mergers and acquisition, some of which I'll explain further. Modifications and provisions for differential voting rights, about which I'm very grateful to the media. A lot of you all have written about it as to how that will bring in a certain sense of ownership for the people who founded the companies, and that will give them the right to retain their control of their own companies. Withdrawal of over 1,400 prosecutions under Companies Act. Again, a point where I want media, I'm very grateful that you've been writing about it. We are inclined to move from the prosecution route to more humane approach. Repeatedly examples before you to prove that, and therefore I would want to request companies and also media to see that the intention of this government at no point wants to pursue anything in the name of prosecution. Here are the examples concrete, which is not happening today, but over the last few weeks, we can very clearly tell you that that's the kind of step that we've taken. The IBC framework, all of you are very familiar. Even as the budget session was going on, even as all of us were focusing on budget-related matters, because of the way in which certain interpretations were given by some authorities and tribunals, we had to go through very quickly amending the IBC just so that no anomalies existed, and that has, as much as possible, we can get information that has benefited the MSMEs and home buyers. We shall ensure that we keep going in that route. So with this backdrop, I now go over to my first silo, which relates to respecting and honoring wealth creators. CSR violations, about which all of us have been hearing, not to be treated as criminal offense and would instead be a civil liability. Ministry of Corporate Affairs will review the sections under Companies Act. Government has provided companies through revised orders time for completing ongoing projects towards fulfilling their CSR obligations. So every doubt that was prevailing outside, I would want to dispel it today, that there is no intention of the government to go on the prosecution route. CSR will only be treated as a civil matter and not at all as a criminal matter. The second point there in my first silo is issue of IT orders, notices, summons, letters, etc., shall now go through a centralized system. What does that actually mean? It means on or after 1st October 2019, all notices, summons, orders, etc. by the income tax authorities shall be issued through a centralized computer system, and it will contain computer-generated unique documentation identification number. Some of you all have already started writing about it, great sense of what is coming, but what actually it means is, if there is a notice being issued at the ground level and some amount is being claimed on an SSC, that without a central approval cannot happen, and also the amount stated there will eventually either be resolved or resolved in favor of the authorities, and therefore the tax will be paid or the claim will be settled, but the amount shall be what was claimed and not more or less. And this will be available for the assessor himself to see it, so that he knows what he is being asked. If necessary, he can even quote that and complain, so that there are no anomalies in paper and actual practice. So this is one way in which we think the harassment angle can be addressed in favor of the assessee. The second, any communication issued without computer-generated unique document identification number, the DIN number, that shall be treated non-est. In other words, if anybody has issued from his own level at the ground level, that notice shall not be treated. Actually, the assessee can put it aside and say, I've not received any note, nobody is going to follow him up. Unless the notice goes through the central clearance, and unless the notice has a DIN number, the document identification number, it need not be taken seriously by any assessee at all. So let's make that very clear. And all old notices, the question naturally arises, you announced this, what happens to those which were given earlier?